today's episode, I wanted to talk about my top 10 favorite horror films. While I love all films, horror has always held a special place in my heart growing up. From John Carpenter and Tobe Hooper to Wes Craven and Tom Holland, I love the makeup effects artists, the creepy storylines, and the grim-style fairy tales that always seem to have a fuck around and find out moral lesson. Number 10. There are only so many spots on this list, but this one had to make my list. John Carpenter's The Thing had to take my number 10 spot. With Kurt Russell taking the lead role and surrounded by a phenomenal supporting cast featuring Carpenter's favorites like Keith David, also in another Carpenter favorite of mine, They Live. The Thing also features veterans like Wilford Brimley and Richard Dysart. Such a great cast all the way around. The Thing creeps into your psyche and has you doubting everyone while the tension keeps ratcheting up and escalating. With outstanding effects done by the legendary Rob Bottin, this horrific, icy masterpiece will definitely give you the chills. Number 9. The number 9 spot on my list goes to the legendary Wes Craven and his dream theater, A Nightmare on Elm Street. I originally saw this when I was about 12 years old, and that scene with Freddy's arms stretching out, sparking, getting longer and longer, or when he pushed through the wall over Nancy's bed when it seemed to be rubber, that floored me, man. So what an outstanding villain to be added to the horror ethos. Freddy is one of the ultimate horror villains. Heather Langenkamp as Nancy was a great final girl, and the effects like seeing Johnny Depp's Glenn getting swallowed into the bed or Tina's final moments on the ceiling, they were a sight to behold in 1984. The creep factor still holds up to this day, in my opinion, and A Nightmare on Elm Street is a classic. Number 8. Amityville 2: The Possession takes my number 8 spot. It's directed by Damiano Damiani. This movie scared the ever-living shit out of me when I first saw it. Even his name sounds like something out of an Exorcist movie. You know, Dami. I still regard it as one of the greatest possession movies ever made. It stars Burt Young from Rocky fame, Diane Franklin from Better Off Dead and The Last American Virgin, and Jack Magner as Sonny. I also find Amityville 2: The Possession much scarier than the original. While the original Amityville horror had that initial shock factor the first time you saw it, Amityville 2 had that creepy, possessed, pure evil, right down to incest thing working for it. I mean, it was a really scary movie. There's a feeling of pure dread around this one because you knew it was based around the real-life murders of the DeFeo family in that original Amityville house. So this was pretty much supposed to be the prequel to the original Amityville horror, and it just works. It was really terrifying. If you're into possession films, check out Amityville 2: The Possession. Number 7. The original 1979 Alien was Ridley Scott firing on all cylinders, starring Sigourney Weaver, Tom Skerritt, John Hurt, Yaphet Kotto, Harry Dean Stanton, Veronica Cartwright. What an outstanding cast in this movie. There was something gritty and real about the original Alien. It was, slimy and steamy and claustrophobic. Even the set of the Nostromo was constructed to have low ceilings to make you feel boxed in. The designs by H.R. Geiger, they were otherworldly. Who could forget the face huggers and the chest bursting scene? In space, no one can hear you. Well, no one can hear you in space, but, it's space, but it's still a scary flick. Just to note too, these are my opinions based on the movies I love. I'd love to read your list below in the comments. Number 6. If you grew up in the puritanical lifestyle of Catholicism or similar religions, then this one strikes fear in your heart. It's Richard Donner's The Omen, and that takes my number 666 spot on the list. See what I did there? Yes, The Goonies, Superman, and Lethal Weapon. Richard Donner directed this hellish tale. This film creeps you out on several levels. Either the thought of the Antichrist completely freaks you out, or adopting such a little shit gets under your goosebump skin in this film. Either way, this is a well-crafted film steeped in biblical myth, and Gregory Peck and Lee Remick give it that legitimate heavyweight acting credibility. And the whole trilogy is actually pretty decent. Wrapping the whole thing up in politics just seems like smart filmmaking. If the devil's going to show up anywhere, it'll be in public office. If religious folklore is your thing, then The Omen hits a home run, and it's a scary flick, so check it out. Number 5. Some people regard this one as one of the scariest, if not the scariest film of all time. William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist, directed by William Friedkin and stars Linda Blair, Ellen Burstyn, Max von Sydow, and Jason Miller as Father Karras. And also a fun little fact that I just found out. Jason Miller is actually the real-life father of actor Jason Patric. Yeah, you learn something new every day, huh? To me, this movie has become less frightening over the years. When I was younger, this one was a doozy. Hollywood really came for the Christians back in the 70s and 80s. This is a story of a little girl that becomes possessed by a nasty entity, and a couple of priests suit up to do battle. It's not for the weak of heart or people that don't appreciate a good cup of pea soup. Number 4. My number 4 spot is going to a werewolf film, and it almost went to Joe Dante's The Howling, the original Howling. I think that's a really underrated werewolf flick, and if you haven't seen the original Howling, go watch it. It's a cool flick. But in the end, there's one king of the werewolf movie, and that's An American Werewolf in London, directed by John Landis. And can we just note for a second how many insanely gifted directors worked on horror films in the 70s and 80s? It's pretty nuts, actually. An American Werewolf in London stars David Naughton, Griffin Dunne, and Jenny Agutter. It rides that line perfectly between horror and humor. When two friends get attacked by a werewolf while, on a walking tour of Britain, things get a little hairy for them. It's clever, it's sexy, it's scary, and has one of the best werewolf transitions in cinema history. Actually, this is where I'd give the edge to The Howling, I think. Its transition is a little bit better, a little slimier, but American Werewolf is no slouch either, and Rick Baker is an effects legend. Overall, American Werewolf is pretty much a perfect werewolf film. It's not only scary, but it's fun. And I think in the end, that's what we all want. We want a horror film that's creepy and fun. And that is An American Werewolf in London. Number 3. All right, we're coming down the home stretch now, and we have to add in another John Carpenter entry. No horror list would be complete without John Carpenter's Halloween. Halloween's a staple every year in the fall. It is for me, has been since I was a kid. Written by Carpenter and Deborah Hill, Carpenter made the perfect Halloween film. 15 years after murdering his sister on Halloween, Michael Myers returns to Haddonfield to kill again. Starring Jamie Lee Curtis and Donald Pleasance, Halloween is paced beautifully and has the ultimate final girl in Jamie Lee Curtis. She pretty much set the bar for all final girls to follow. Others have tried to remake Carpenter's masterpiece, and they have failed miserably. You can't blame them for taking a swing at the king, but Carpenter remains on his throne. There is only one Halloween, and that's John Carpenter's Halloween. Number 2. In 1976, Brian De Palma took a tiny girl named Sissy Spacek and creeped me out for life. This is the story of Carrie White, a timid, shy, friendless girl who's basically flowered in the attic by her psycho-religious mother and unleashes her telekinetic powers after being humiliated by everyone. Here's the thing. Carrie isn't even the one that creeped me out the most. It was her mother, played by Piper Laurie, in one of the greatest horror roles ever put to film. There is nothing more terrifying than a religious zealot that hurts people under the pretense of faith, and this woman is horrifying in this movie. She scarred me for life. You add in the set pieces like the Christ statue with the glowing eyes in the punishment closet, or the way this poor girl was abused by her fellow classmates. And this movie is a masterclass in uneasiness and imagery that will stick with me until the day I die. Carrie is a horrifying movie. It scared the shit out of me, and it still does. Every time I watch Carrie, I get creeped out. It's a great film. Number 1. My number 1 horror film of all time. And I know some of you are going to give me grief over this one and say it isn't a horror film, but yes it is, and go make your own damn lists. My number 1 film is Jaws, and where do I even start? Steven Spielberg took Peter Benchley's novel with the assist from Carl Gottlieb and turned it into not only the #1 summer blockbuster of all time, but the reason I still won't swim in the ocean to this day. I can't even imagine better actors than Scheider, Shaw, and Dreyfuss in these roles. They were perfect, absolutely flawless. Now, the thing that makes Jaws so terrifying, other than this shark swallow you whole, a little shaking, tenderize, and down you go, is that Spielberg was smart. He left more to your imagination. The scariest place you can be is in your own head. The Chrissy Watkins death, her being shaken and screaming, you not being able to see what's going on underneath the water surface, that was genius. Not being at the top of the food chain is a pretty good reason for Jaws to be my #1, and I don't see it being unseated anytime soon. And I'll continue to avoid swimming in the depths of the ocean. Jaws will forever play in my head. That is my list. Thanks for watching. Feel free to add your picks and comments below, and I will see you next time. Thanks for tuning in.